Welcome back to the Sportv Europe and CEE virtual conference. I hope you've been enjoying the discussion so far today. We're into the home straight here, but there's still a lot more to discuss. My name is Philip O'Connor and I'm a sports journalist, broadcaster and commentator based right here in Stockholm in Sweden. And I'm here to bring you the next exciting topic on our packed agenda today, where we're going to talk about betting operators and sports media partnerships in Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States. Don't forget to drop your questions into the chat function and we'll do our best to get you the answers that you want for this conference here today. With me this afternoon are Dr. Ekaterina Hartmann, who is Director of Legal and Regulatory Affairs at the European Gaming and Betting Association. We have Lasha Machavariani, who's the founder and CEO of Sports Media Holding and Setanta Sports Media. And last but not least, in Miami, Florida, we have Maxim Afanasyev, who's Chief Product Officer at Liga, Stavok. I suppose to set the scene a little bit, Ekaterina, you're probably the one best placed to tell us a little bit about what the market looks like at the moment. Because over the last 10 or 15 years since the internet opened up for betting, things have changed a lot, but it's still very fragmented in Europe and the CIS. Am I right in saying that?
You're absolutely right. Indeed, we have ours is gambling is an old practice, but online gambling specifically is actually quite recent in terms of it's been around now for around 20 years that it has really kind of gone mainstream. And unfortunately, in those 20 years, we haven't really been able to achieve a kind of, at least in the EU, kind of a common market for gambling. It is indeed a very fragmented situation. Every member state in the EU has their own regulation. And I'm mostly going to be using examples and talking about the EU and the EEA, because this is what we focus at EGBA, and while we always follow with interest kind of outside developments as well, this is really where our expertise really comes in. So one of the questions which I very often also get asked is, are we going to have kind of a single market for gambling anytime soon? The answer for that, for the moment, is definitely not. We're not going to have a market and a common market in the next 5 years. However, this doesn't mean that there are not so many other exciting regulatory things kind of happening on EU level, which concern our sector very directly. I mean, we know the GDPR came with a bang, 2 years ago now. We have anti-money laundering, which is a very, very important topic for us, as well as electronic identification. These are all kind of big topics at the moment in Brussels. A lot is being discussed. There are going to be huge changes in both spheres. The rules are going to change quite drastically. The rules are going to be tightened, especially on anti-money laundering, considering all the recent scandals. But on the other hand, for example, regarding electronic identification, which is so important for Know Your Customer, we are going to see exciting new developments in terms of more access to electronic identification for a larger amount of European citizens, making it easier for us to identify them. So there's also audiovisual media services. There's part of the consumer acquis that we're part of. So there are a lot of kind of exciting things coming up from Brussels as well, even though it may not be kind of in a sector specific way, in kind of a directive on gambling, there is still a lot going on. And then when it comes to the individual member states, I think what we have also can notice is that there's been a lot of convergence as well. So everyone, more or less, every regulator and every legislator, they want to achieve the same goal. They want to achieve very similar goals. They all talk about channeling, but they go about it in kind of a slightly different way. Of course, this leads to a lot of compliance costs for companies. And the more we can actually help to somehow standardize this, and the more we can bring them together, it means kind of less costs for operators. So one initiative like this is something that the Commission is doing and that EGBA have been pushing on for years, and we've been heavily involved in. It's a new standard on on reporting, and this is being done by SEN. You probably all have heard of SEN. It's like a big standard, biggest standard setting body. So this is something that's trailblazing for our industry. EGBA as such is also working on a number of kind of initiatives that bring regulatory issues closer to help member states, also sort of give them a blueprint of, look, this is where you should be going if you want to both be industry friendly. So if you want your market really to succeed, and at the same time, if you want to do it kind of in a responsible way, but also in a kind of business friendly way. So we've done work like this, for example, on advertising. You know that there are a lot of advertising restrictions everywhere popping up in Europe, in Italy, in Spain. We've had in UK the whistle to whistle ban, obviously. So a lot of these kind of a lot of these regulatory restrictions can be prevented by, if we as an industry take more responsibility towards really driving the debate and not only following the legislation as it comes, but kind of also really driving the debate forward and kind of showing from our side, from practicing this and working this every day, kind of what are solutions that really work.
Yeah, I think it's very important for you to be sort of at the forefront there and try to guide people into making legislation that works, because eventually I was going to move on there to Lasha, because Lasha, I think you're in over 40 countries with Setanta Sports Media, and each one...
14 million.
1-4, sorry, so 14. But
hope in the future. So what you predicted will happen soon.
Oh, you will get there, believe you me. You know, but Setanta's been around for a long time, and you have to react to the legislation and to the regulations when it comes to betting and what you do in your shows and what you do with your media. How difficult is that on a day-to-day basis? How much of that your headspace does that take up?
So regarding these 14 countries, we mean post-Soviet Union countries, except Russia, so we are presented everywhere. And the development of Setanta started in this region, like in the CIS region, started from 2012. And by 2019, it was able in 7 years to already achieve to be presented in the 14 countries and with the leading sports content, starting from La Liga, Bundesliga, in several countries, even English Premier League. In Kazakhstan, for example, we do have every top 5 content from football, Formula One, NBA, and so it gives you big bargaining power at one point. But at the other stage, so it's very much linked to the regulations. So what's going on into the betting industry? Why? Because in CIS we can assume that let's say the major partner for the sports media, this is the betting operator, in the betting sector, let's say like this. And the regulations for the betting, so it differs from countries to country in this 14 country, because somewhere, for example, there are some countries in Central Asia in which betting is prohibited. So it's not white market. That's why we cannot officially make the localization process there for the TV sports, because we do not have the proper stable betting partner, who will finance all this stuff. And at the end of this day, this is good for the customers, because when the customer gets high quality content onto its local language in a country, it's Georgia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Ukraine, or Armenia, for example, he's happy at the end of the day. And in what quality does it get? But on the other hand, for example, and Georgia was the first case of the localizing it onto the local language. Why? Because there we did have the very straightforward regulation towards betting. It was on a very high level. At the same time, the advertisement regulations between the betting and the sports media as well. And so it helped us much in getting the very long-term strategic partner in the form of Ajarabet, for example, with whom we have started working from 2016, and they are still our strategic partners in these countries. So we had the same case, for example, in Kazakhstan, and so that's why it very much differs, because it's directly linked. Where you do have some kind of the not fully regulated market, so it is directly linked to the sports media, because as I told you, so the main stakeholder in the revenue stream of the sports media, this is the betting. So it's very, very much linked.
Maxim, you're working with Liga Stavok from your base there in Miami and Florida. Could you just tell me, because you're on the other side of this then, so you would be partnering with people like Lasha, you would be looking for events to get your offering in front of his viewers, his listeners, his readers, right?
Yeah, exactly. We try to find all possible opportunities to be presented and to engage with our clients. Although we are going very much digital, TV and TV advertising plays a huge role still today. Again, although we see that the trend of digitalization is big, and a majority of our customers, although we also have retail presence, 80% of our business comes from online. So it means that people are browsing different websites, but still TV and TV advertising is a huge thing.
It seems to be one of those things that, you know, if you're online or you're on Twitter and you think, oh, you know, well, 5,000 people or 10,000 people saw a tweet, and you think that that's a lot. And then you go onto a public service broadcaster or you go onto CNN or something, and it's still so much bigger.
At the same time, I can comment on that. So actually traditionally Setanta is operating from '92. So it started its broadcasting in Ireland. It was presented on every continent except Latin America. This is Eurasia, so a huge company. And traditionally it was the the TV, like the main driver was the TV. Yeah. So recently we've started also building the ecosystems. Like for example in Georgia, when we did have the strong, or in Kazakhstan, a strong presence in TV, it helped us much to bring the a large social media and also to build the news websites, in terms of as we had the traffic. So we've created the ecosystem and then also the OTT platform, on which then you do have the pay-per-view for the customers, etc., etc. So TV in this case, so the most important part is to have the ability to work with the betting sector. And if you are not even much creative, but if you just follow the trends and follow the needs of your clients in the form of the betting operator, so you will build the ecosystem. But the fundament for that, of course, these are the regulations.
That was actually what I meant, Lasha, when I said the Setanta. I didn't mean Setanta Sports Media. I was talking about Setanta in general being, I think it's 46 countries in total, but of course you have 14 where you are there in the CIS. And if we zoom out just a little bit on this one, Ekaterina, the problems really of regulation, the problems of broadcasting, the problems of sponsorship are all related to the image of gambling. So we have had a situation where if we look back in the past and we look at Las Vegas and we talk about the mafia and we see people playing for money that they don't have, but gambling has changed over the course of the last 10 or 20 years. We saw a huge boom in internet poker for a while there. How is gambling perceived at the moment? Is it now a leisure activity, or is it still something that's seen as being done in smoky back rooms and something to be avoided at all costs?
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting question. I think for us, we've also discussed this quite a lot, and we kind of divide it into how is gambling being seen at an EU level here in Brussels, like kind of how do we represent gambling, and then kind of how does the public at large obviously perceive it. And I can tell you a little anecdote because we are working here with the Commission for quite some years. And there was someone new that was dealing with gambling in the Commission. So we had a number of meetings with her over time. And then at some point, she went to ICE in London. So then she comes back from ICE and she says like, well, Ekaterina, here in Brussels, EGBA, you represent such a professional image for the industry. But now I've went to ICE, and is it normal that there were strippers everywhere? And I was like, oh, well, like, how can I probably get out of this? And I think it sort of represents as well kind of what the industry kind of is beyond, because I think regulatory compliance, legal, it's kind of a little bubble. And then you have also kind of more like marketing, the marketing business part. And I think sometimes the two parts have some difficulties also kind of working together. Some of our members say, for example, from the marketing teams that, oh no, the compliance regulatory, they're always telling us, no, you cannot do this, you cannot do this. But the reason why kind of they're doing this is not only because the rules are made in a certain way, but also because we need to, as an industry, to kind of be more responsible in, we cannot just ignore and say anymore, I think that this is an entertainment or this is an entertainment pastime. We need to acknowledge that there are certain risks, and the risks are definitely not as large as sometimes you can hear them being portrayed in the media. That as far as really scientific studies go, it usually, we can say that between 1% and 2%, let's say, of all gamblers are really really have some sort of problem. And sometimes in the public eye, it would seem like almost everyone has a problem that gambles online, which is really not the case. And I think during our previous talk, I think, Lasha, you were mentioning as well that there's also a wide divergence in how people in the different member states really perceive gambling. That in some member states, in some states, I'm so used to talking about member states because we're talking about the EU. In some countries, like, it's perceived more negatively, and in some countries it's perceived more positively. But also this public perception ultimately also affects the perception of the public. It's something that we all need to be aware of and work at, because we have seen how it also affects obviously members of the parliament, members of the council. So whenever you're talking to someone, it's always, you're also talking in our sector to their kind of preconceptions and also to the things that they come up with from watching TV, from their kind of personal life as well. And it can be quite a charged topic. So I think only by kind of being responsible as an industry and kind of showing leadership, we can make some sort of difference. And this is what associations in Brussels have been doing for many, many years, especially really kind of associations of established businesses that have been here for 50 years in Brussels. We've been here for 12 as EGBA. So there is much more awareness in the industry as a whole about the importance of influencing things, and influencing things really at the very kind of beginning stage already when you're talking about making regulation. But indeed, public perception at large, it's something that I think everybody needs to be aware of in the way that their company is conducting itself.
That's what brings me on to my next question, Lasha. I have heard of, there's a magazine here in Sweden, for instance, very popular soccer magazine, and they made a conscious decision not to accept advertising or sponsorship from betting companies. And you'll now see that in TV, and we've seen the whistle-to-whistle ban in the UK, where gambling companies aren't allowed to advertise during the game. As somebody who puts sports content in front of a very, very wide audience across 14 countries, how do you feel about people taking that moral high ground? Could you see a situation where you yourself say, I wouldn't do it?
It's very, it's very difficult. So, no, difficult question, good question, but very difficult situation. For example, in Georgia, because of the social responsibility stuff, and there were some cases regarding this, first broadcasting TV had to say that it's not taking the advertisement from the betting operators, but at the same time, it's financed by the budget, and it has the obligation to buy the World Cup and Euro and all this stuff like Olympics, etc., etc. So if it is putting, I don't know, maybe $10 million in content on the yearly basis, and it cannot just generate anything from the betting, which would be, I would assume, from, I don't know, 65 to 85% of the total revenue in Georgia, for example, in Georgia. It creates big headache. At the same time, so if we couldn't do that, I mean, the sports medias, and this magazine is the sports media, you said regarding the sports media representative. So if it is financed somehow by other things, but you cannot run the proper business model, in these countries unless you do have the ability to work with the betting sector. So you cannot properly do, or you need to be the company owned by the government, as I told you, which will finance you from the budget. But if it's privately held, so what motivation do you have to invest in something where you know that you will never ever make something out of it? So it's at the same time, so I'll give you also one example. In the region, betting organizations created its own betting association and said that as we are perceived badly, so let's make the gentleman agreement between ourselves that we will not be advertising into the outdoor advertisement, but will be left into the sports media. Why? Because outdoor advertisement, if outdoor business will not benefit, so sport fans do not care whether outdoor billboards will benefit from something or not. But sport fans care when it comes to the sports media, and they need the sports media to benefit, because in this way they are getting appropriate entertainment for what they are paying the money, and lots of people are watching sports, and it's very important. So it's the chain, you know, and it's the chain reaction. So if something is wrong in this chain, in the middle or in the start, or you know, somewhere, so it damages the business model, and the business model is very, very hard. For example, in difference with, I used to work for the betting sector as well, and I know perfectly how it's structured. And if you do have the database of the users, then the fluctuation and the deviation into the content, into the, I don't know, acquisition of the products from the vendors doesn't really, you know, it's not a big deviation. You know, you acquire something for the revenue share of 15%, next year maybe 14, 16. So the deviation is like this. In the sports rights content, so you buy the contents for, I don't know, 3 years on the average, yeah, and the benchmark after the 3 years might go, I don't know, 120% more. So you even cannot forecast, because a new player will come and the content is something like is selling for the high price. So it's very, very, very risky business. So in this case, yeah, it's very difficult when you do have the uncertainty ahead of it, and you need to invest the money in this. So yeah.
Maxim, as one of those people who is investing that money, you're obviously looking to put your products, your services in front of people who are going to use them. Where do you find it's best to do that? Where's the best return on investment for you? Is it to advertise in a soccer ground, in an app, in a newspaper? Where do you find value?
I think
there's no...
digital was countable, what he can count and say that what was the,
show me the clicks.
I would say that there is no an answer to this question, because you need to always look for a perfect marketing mix. You should be investing in many areas, do tests, well, whatever test you can do, and to see what works best. Of course, it's hard to measure TV advertising or outdoor advertising, but there are ways to do it. It's not 100% accurate like it is with digital advertising, of course, but there are still ways to do it. So in my opinion, you need to test a lot, and the more you test, the closer you are to this perfect setup. And actually, what I wanted to raise to add to previous questions is that I think, to me, it looks like similar to what it was with tobacco and alcohol, where advertising of these, I mean, tobacco and alcohol was banned. I remember how you used to have these Hartmann's advertising on Formula One car, and you don't have it anymore. I think generally banning approach is wrong here. It doesn't lead to, when you try to ban something, you create a gray market, gray sector, which is no good at the end of the day. So I think it is important to find the right ratio and the dialogue between business and authorities. And I think we actually have a quite good setup here in Russia today. Although the market is very, very regulated. For example, we are not allowed to use human beings in our advertising, which is sad, because it's always great to have a soccer player advertising opportunity to place a bet, but we can't do it. And it's even worse, because the wording says that you cannot use a human being. Like, even if you want to use I don't know, an android, like that looks like a living creature, you cannot do it. You cannot even show the soccer ball going into a net, because it kind of still replicates that the person is hitting the ball. So a lot of restrictions, but it's, at the end of the day, that is done to, you know, not to exploit the people's attitude towards sports betting. And also what we do here in Russia, together with authorities, we have recently, the new law came into place recently, just a couple of days ago. Now we pay 5% of all our GGR. And what is important, this money, they don't go straight to tax services, but it goes to sports federations. So if we make more money with soccer, then more money goes to soccer federation. more money. If we take more money on tennis or table tennis, then this money, more money goes to this table tennis federation or tennis federation, which is great because this money can be used to support sports, to support the youth sports, and that creates a perfect tie between sports betting and sports itself. So sports betting, they support sports, and this is very important to create this so that the perception of sports betting changes. And I think it's also, there's an obligation for sports betting operators. I agree that we should not go into the way where we would, go like strippers way. I think we should go more professional way. If we are sports betting operators, then we should be all about sports. We should not use wrong images here, but rather do it very professionally. It's the new era, and we should go towards. We should go there.
Yeah, and just to add on, yeah, Maxim. So I was, yeah, and he answered quite correctly that there is no direct question regarding this, because it matters. So what you are striving for, and it matters. In which phase your company is. If you are matured and you want to spend less for the brand awareness, but more for the targeted stuff, so you are doing this differently through maybe different channels. If you want to make some kind of the buzz of a certain, I don't know, functionality which you have added into the features list of your product, so you are doing this differently. But at the same time, yeah, it all should be counted like what the spending per average player does give you in the long run. Yeah, so it's yeah. So, and at the same time, so it's very important to have the touch bases with different and diversified offerings from the sports side, sports media side, and to test it like monetarily, as Maxim has said, in order to just always be with the right benchmark of the KPI and to not have the wrong perception. So it's very important to control the market.
Ekaterina, I have a question for you. Okay, a new country appears in Europe or the CIS tomorrow, just appears, New Republic, and they've no regulation whatsoever. What do you think a good, responsible regulatory framework would look like? What would the industry like to see? How would it like to be regulated, do you think?
So that's a very interesting question, first of all, Philip. How would well, first of all, it would need to strike the right balance between regulating and also leaving enough room for the industry to be able to offer an attractive product. Because ultimately, this is where a lot of member states make the mistake. They say, we want to have a very responsible framework. We want to have quite heavy restrictions. We want to, and then what happens is these heavy restrictions, they actually lead to the offering of a very boring product. They lead to, let's say, you would have no possibility to give bonuses or even welcome bonuses. Your odds would be not as good as the odds coming, let's say, from the unregulated offer coming from outside. We know that on the internet everything is one click away, so it's not difficult for players to be able to play on the unregulated offer. So it's very important that any such regulation kind of strikes the right balance. And of course, here you have the responsible gambling side, you have the side around how you're going to conduct AML, you have the regulation around how you're going to advertise. And I think you used the example of Sweden earlier. Sweden recently opened their market, and the advertising all of a sudden became kind of exploded, from the moment that the regulation went live. And this is because let's say it wasn't sufficiently restricted. So then there was a huge backlash, which led in the way to now very much restrictions that are going too much probably on the other side, you see. So striking the right balance in regulation is very, very important. And that's why it's also very important to work with the industry, to really talk to the experts, to kind of see what are the important kind of pain points. Taxation is obviously hugely important. Finding the right taxation basis. I mean, there's still in some member states discussion on whether you should be companies should be taxed on GGR or whether they should be taxed on turnover. Of course, we as the industry would like to be taxed on GGR because it gives a much more clearer picture about what you're actually paying in terms of your taxes. So all these kind of things go together. I mean, Maxim was talking about essentially also like Russia having kind of a sports betting right, sort of. We have never been really a fan of the sports betting right at EGBA. We've always more considered that sport should be for the member states to distribute all these earnings, so that it should kind of, that support for sport should go via taxation, because we have the example of France where it's been going on for a while, and we don't really think that ultimately it's a good example, because let's say the money for sport was supposed to be gathered for integrity purposes, but ultimately no one has ever seen any kind of integrity actions kind of really kind of what is happening with this financing. So maybe I'll just cut it there because it's starting to become a bit too long, but basically every single aspect of the regulation needs to be kind of properly thought out.
I think that's exactly it. It's kind of grown organically over 100 years or 200 years in Europe, and it's grown from a dark place of morality, and then all of a sudden you introduce the internet and everything goes nuts. We have a question in here from Eric Farrow, which I think is very interesting, and his question is, with COVID, sports in a way stopped, esport took over. What is your advice about betting in esport and how the industry will react? Imagine people fighting in a game and people being able to bet on this challenge. Lasha, if I could go to you on that one, did you start to sort of show esports on Setanta or feature them in your media?
And it will be also interesting question for Maxim regarding their sportsbook perspective. So at one day we are waking up and we have nothing to show. You know, we have nothing to broadcast because no events are. Well, it was tragedy. So COVID for sports media business, it's tragedy. You do not have anything to show. So what should you do? Because you do have running costs regarding the office, regarding the staff, prepaid everything, and you need to do something. So we had quite interesting cases. Of course, it didn't substitute onto the betting side the proportion of bets. I don't know, maximum 5% probably of the total bets, but still we needed to do something. So very quickly we reorganized, and we have organized in 5 different countries the local countries tournaments for the esports, for the FIFA actually. So it was done regarding the FIFA, and we had this tournaments run like for 4 weeks, for 6 weeks period before we had the first Bundesliga when it was back. I mean, Bundesliga saved the whole industry, let's say like this. It really did. So I was not the fan of Bundesliga, but I am now because Bundesliga was the first league. And so it gave us some time to make still the customers engage, the betting operators more or less happy, because they did have the product where they could advertise there some betting slips or something like that, and it led to the better cooperation between us and the betting operators. At the same time, it also created some boost into this esports stuff, but it wouldn't be sufficient and it wouldn't last. So Maxim can comment on this, but for the short period, yes, this is what have saved us and gave us the ability to say that we do broadcast now the live game of somebody, but the live game, it's not something, Yeah.
Maxim, did you already offer odds on esports? Did you have any products that featured esports? And if so, did they sort of go up? Did people want to gamble on those things when the pandemic hit?
Yeah, I guess COVID taught us, actually COVID, I think, was the main driver for digital transformation. And it learned us to be agile very much. So we had to quickly react on this. I think it's important to distinguish here, because what we've seen is a huge interest towards sports simulators like FIFA, PES, NHL, NBA 2K. And usually these simulators are not considered to be esports, so that's why I want to strict out here. with regards to classical Counter-Strike Dota 2, we did see an increase 2 to 3 times, but it was not that big. But simulators were huge, and at certain point, FIFA and PES went up and took over first place, and they were generating up to 35% of our revenues during the pandemic. We even went in for a discussion with our partner, Russian Premier League, and created the Esports League during this pandemic. So we arranged a tournament where professional players were playing Russian Premier League tours every day. And it was a weekly seasons, and it was quite popular. So our clients liked it, and we even managed to find a good partnership with the media channels. So that they would broadcast the finals of this tournament. So yeah, I can say that particularly esports simulators are a big story, and they are very simple, easy to digest for punters, so they like it.
Yeah, it certainly did. At that stage, we would have watched 2 flies crawling up a wall because we were so starved of sport at that time. Now, hopefully, I'm touching wood and crossing my fingers here that we're, going to come out of this pandemic at some time in the next year. And, luckily we were all delighted, Lasha, when the Bundesliga came back. I think actually the first league to start in Europe was on the Faroe Islands, and they broadcast that game. I think it generated more money than any game in their history.
Sorry for interrupting. The league that did not stop was the Belarus league.
Oh, Belarus,
yes.
Of course, they kept going. Yeah.
Belarus.
So we're forever in the debt of Belarus there, one of the territories that Lasha is involved in. But if we look to the future now, and if we try to look beyond COVID, which is obviously still very difficult to do, Lasha, where do you see the relationship between sports media and sports betting being in the next 5 or 10 years? How much more can it develop, or do you think it's going to retreat?
So, it's 2 different businesses, absolutely 2 different businesses, but at the same time, it has the most targeted audience for the sports betting than from any media, theoretically can be existed. Yeah, it is more targeted. So that's why it's most important for the betting operators and stakeholders to have good relationships with the media providers. In some countries, we see some cases, for example, where betting operators are striving to get into the business, to become the sports media providers as well, because it secures for them many things. But we've seen these cases on the markets that we do operate, where these are completely different businesses. You need to understand that. So it's much more easy and it's much more, let's say, practical to mind your own business. So if you are sports media, to be sports media, because sports media also tried to become to establish the partnerships or to have these franchises or to become the betting operators, like in Russia, the cooperation between Rambler and Drew and the franchise of the Bivin, so which Maxim remembers. Yeah, so there are always trying, like the betting from here, sports media from there, but the most important is to keep the strategic relationships and to know the common ground, what's going on behind the legislations or regulatory part, and what is most important, to be in some kind of the frames of the responsible gaming, and to take care several things that needs to be taken care. So not to overslash everything. You need to the betting and sports media needs more cooperation in how these kind of things will be created. Because, for example, there is the question that 14 years old boy is also watching Everton Manchester United, yes? So how you can ban the advertisements for the if you are not technically so sophisticated through the cable TV networks that it identifies who is watching what, yeah? But you need to be careful there. You need to try to work in the direction where you are controlling, like what hours can be shown the advertisement in the digital as well, in the news, onto the social media as well. So betting sector and sports media needs to cooperate more, how to make the sports content more secure for the whole auditorium with the betting advertisement on it, but not to interfere into one another's direction.
Maxim, whatever we think of the morality of things, gambling companies, sports betting companies still have a huge amount of money that they spend on marketing. There's going to be people watching this who are involved in broadcasting, but who are also involved in sport, who are involved in clubs or in associations. What would you like them to do so that they can attract the money that you have to invest? How do you think a good partnership with them in the future would look?
I think first of all, it is important to understand that for some reason, bookmakers are always perceived as the company that have, you know, a lot of money, like we sit on this money. But actually, with the things evolving, regulation changing, prices going up, things have changed. I would say that the companies, bookmakers companies, they are now looking very much towards efficiency. So I think and things have changed. I see that a lot of companies or our competitors, they are counting money very wisely and they're spending this money very wisely. So I think well, we are aiming always for partnerships, and the partnership starts with decent conditions. So what we see sometimes that companies that approach us, broadcasters or even some sports organizations, they feel like, okay, we can come to bookmakers and ask for millions because they probably have those millions, but that's not true. And I think it's important that we have the fair play here, and we are being perceived as a regular business, and we need just to create a proper partnerships.
Ekaterina, in terms of creating proper partnerships, if you look from your seat in Brussels now, doing the work that you do, who holds the power at the moment? Who can change this situation? Who can make it better and who can make it worse?
Well, I mean, it's always, well, that's a very complex question. First of all, obviously, we have the regulators that really have the power to kind of to very much shape the market via the rules that they choose to instill. But I think it's also important that obviously that we work together with sport. I think and we online gambling contributes a lot to sport in a lot of other ways, like beyond just kind of, let's say, direct sponsorship, let's say a sports betting right or any sort of direct taxes. For example, I think for sports sponsorship, I think last year only EGBA members contribute around 86 million euros, and this is figures for the EU only, like not even like kind of worldwide. So it's obviously a very lucrative exchange, and we need to work together more on a number of issues. We are working very well with sport as well on other topics. As you know, one of the major, for example, the major issues that sports are facing at the moment is IP infringing websites that are illegally streaming their content. And this is something that we are working with them and together with them and the European Commission to try to bring a lot more awareness to kind of gambling operators about where your ads are ultimately ending up, because the idea is to stop the stream, to stop these kind of websites by stopping their financing streams. So this is something that sport is very interested in, and it's actually I think they at least here in Brussels, they say that this is their number one kind of threat to sport at the moment, this kind of IP infringing website that just kind of offer their product. So we have a responsibility, kind of, I think all of us, to kind of work together, because the more we work together, well, the less need there is, let's say, for specific regulation. But and this is always the case, but overall, strengthening the partnerships between strengthening partnerships is the most important one.
Lasha, to you, in one sentence, if you could, please, if you could change one thing about the way sports and gambling are related at the moment, what would it be?
Can you repeat the question?
If you could change one thing about the relationship between sports and gambling at the moment, what would that be? What do you think would make the biggest improvement?
I will say, so what Maxim has mentioned. Maxim told that you think that we are sitting onto the money, and so they do have the approach that we are not sitting onto the money when they address to the sports media. But I want this to be changed, and then to say that they do have pretty good cash flow, so let's go ahead.
I'm not going to ask Maxim exactly how much money he has in his budget, but I will put the same question to you, Maxim. What would you like to see change in the relationship between sports and gambling to improve things?
Between sport, well, depends on what you mean by sports here.
I mean
the relationship in relationships, and I understood the position, them to change the position, because they are always like, first front, oh, we do not have the money, but they need to change this position and say, how can we more, effectively collaborate together?
Yeah, I agree here totally. I think that is very important. Again, I mentioned that we pay a lot of now, taxes, this regulation complications. But apart from this, the product itself that we use is becoming much more expensive, because the sports betting today is not only about having the odds, but it's also about having a pretty nice websites, mobile applications, streaming, visualization of data, facts, and we have to pay for all of this, and it's actually, and the prices are going up every year. Even the data itself is becoming much more expensive, because the providers are making exclusive deals with the organizers, and if we were paying, I don't know, a couple of euros per match several years ago, now the prices go up to $30 or $40 per one event to be able to offer it live. And then if you add up another 100 to 300 euros per event if you want to stream it, it makes up really huge investments just to be able to offer this product to our customers. So, and again, this means that we need to be very efficient, and we cannot just spend money and give millions away just to be advertised on the t-shirt or on a TV. So partnership and right collaboration is very important for us.
That sounds absolutely brilliant. We have run out of time, but it seems to me that this is only the start of this particular discussion between the sporting organizations and the betting organizations. Thank you all for taking part in this particular discussion. There's still one super session left to go today, and we're going to take a short little break before Kristen Harrington is back in the hot seat to host a discussion about sports, OTT, and social networks for rights holders. We'll be back at 17:30 with Kristen, but that's it for me. Thank you all very much for watching. Thank you very much for taking part in the debate, and we'll see you all again very soon indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.